Okay, we are live. Thanks everybody for being patient with us when we get everything live here. So we're just about ready to start. If you're hanging out, waiting for the event to start, you're just in time. So welcome everybody to today's webinar. We're going to go ahead and get started. We do have quite a bit of content to cover. This is very granular and technical. So, if anything gets too deep or things of that nature, just know that this event is being recorded and we will be able to send that out for additional views and watches and things of that nature after the fact. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started since we're a little behind schedule on our end. Before we fully dive in to today's event, which is the CMMC level 1, which is where we're focusing today. So we're going to spend all of our time on just level 1. We're going to cover every single thing inside of level 1, so to speak. But I wanted to just kind of provide a quick disclaimer around the Christian Doctrine and the False Claims Act. There's other regulations that businesses are familiar with, such as PCI and things of that nature. And some of those don't have too many teeth, so to speak. You might get a slap on the wrist, some small fine if something isn't done correctly or up to the standard. However, in contrast, if you're working with the federal government, there are massive fines, potential fraud charges that could come into play, and things of that nature. So for SWCTech as a service provider, this isn't uncompromising thing for us when we go through work in this sector. So it requires a very methodical approach, requires a lot of audits. It's literally the law. So I just wanted to call that out as something to be very mindful of when we do this type of work. So, some things that we speak to, we're going to be as technically accurate as possible here, but just wanted to call that out before we dive in. And just so it's known, SWCTech is a registered provider organization, also known as an RPO, and we do have registered practitioners, that are our employees, RPs. So, and to clarify what that means, an RPO and RPs in the CMMC ecosystem provide advice, consulting, and recommendations to their clients. So we are the implementers and consultants, but we do not conduct the certified CMMC assessments ourselves. All right, so now we've got some disclaimers out of the way, a couple housekeeping items. My name is Eric Clark. I've been with SWCTech for about 4 years. My title is Client Success Associate. And we've been running a lot of different presentations over the last year and a half, formerly in person, and as of more lately, webinars and virtual, and we're kind of going to start branching into in person again. So I'm excited to cover this topic. It's very top of mind and relevant for today's business owners, whether you're doing business in the government ecosystem or supply chain or DoD. Even if you're not, these are some really strong best practices from a cybersecurity perspective. And what we're going to cover is, why is this important? What are some of the terms that are going to be talked about? So we'll cover that real briefly. We'll also discuss the interim rule, touch on that, and then we're going to dive into that granular aspect that I mentioned, the domains around level 1, and then the controls within each of those domains. And we're going to try to frame it in a here's what you can do and here's some examples. So there'll be a little bit of both as we go through some of those. And in the background with me is Anthony Center on our team. He's a technical account manager. So if any questions arise, he can be available in the back end through chat or pop on video to answer some, and there will be Q&A at the end as well. So feel free to put some questions through in chat if you'd like, and we'll address them if it's possible to address them while we're presenting, or we can save them till the end. Here at SWCTech, we always like to start with why. Why is CMMC important? And I wanted to highlight what's on the screen here. The primary goal of CMMC is to improve and ensure the safeguarding of sensitive data, including, now these are some important terms, Controlled Unclassified Information, or CUI, and Federal Contract Information, known as FCI. You're going to hear these terms throughout today's presentation. Those are associated with federal contracts. And just a little bit of history, how we got to where we're at today. Beginning in 2017, subcontractors were required to complete an SSP, which stands for a system security plan, an assessment of where they stood relative to that SSP, along with something called the POAM. Lots of terms today, guys. The POAM stands for Plan of Actions and Milestones, and really it was meant for them to help close that gap. And that assessment used the framework of NIST 800-171 standards. However, in 2019, the DoD, the Department of Defense, realized that neither the acquisition officers working for the government or the primaries nor the subcontractors had been effectively responding to those regulations, meaning there was no real audits in place to validate that any work had been done to complete the NIST 800-171 standards. So Congress and the Department of Defense commissioned an updated regulation and standard termed CMMC, which stands for Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. And that was to be created and required for all Department of Defense contracts. So just a little bit of framing as to how we got to this and what it actually is and why it's important. The state of cybersecurity is the attacks that are coming through. You hear about it in the news frequently with the pipeline, some of the meat things that were happening. There's not a day that goes by where you don't turn on the news, you're not hearing something, or maybe you're hearing from your colleagues and things of that nature, or your vendors and such. So it really is important. And as we can see here, the government deemed it critically important. So I'm not going to read these terms. These are just a few terms that I think are relevant to know. There's more than this, and it was really hard to not keep populating this page with more and more and more, but the font kept getting smaller. So I would encourage you to take a screenshot of this page. I believe Sophie, who's moderating, is going to put a link in the chat as well to more terms. So again, we're going to cover a lot of these terms. I think some of the more important ones are, like I had mentioned, the federal contract information, FCI, and then controlled unclassified information, CUI. Those are going to be talked about quite a bit. So grab a screenshot here if you'd like, and we'll go ahead and press on. So the interim rule is something that's worth mentioning here as we approach this, because you're not required to be compliant, nor are there any auditors yet officially to make sure that you are compliant. And the goal or plan here, as outlined by the CMMC accreditation body, or AB, is stated that you don't have to be compliant until October 1st of 2025. So you have some time to work through this, but it is going to take time to work through this. Not only are there technical changes, there's organizational changes and things that are not technical, as well as cultural changes. So the sooner you start to address these things, the stronger the position you'll be in, and the more approachable all this will be. But 6 months from ground zero for level 1 could be expected if some controls are already in place. And I just wanted to talk about some timeline, given the title of today's topic. You're really looking at a 12 to 18 month runway if you're looking to become CMMC level 3 certified. Just to call out, level 2 really is more of a stepping stone to get to level 3, so it's not really a destination. It's a throughput that you're going to have to go through. So just some things to note there. If there's any questions about timeline or things of that nature, what you think it might take for various levels of CMMC, please feel free to ask some questions or save them till the end. Now, when you look at CMMC as a whole, here are all the different domains. And again, for today's framework of conversation and presentation, we're focusing on the 6 highlighted ones: access control, identification, authentication, physical protection, and so forth. So at a glance, there's quite a few different domains that are going to need to be addressed if you are doing anything to get to level 3, if that's a requirement or prerequisite. But if you're just focusing on level 1, it's a bit more approachable. In totality, the 17 domains are related to all 5 levels. And like I said, the 6 highlighted items equate to the 17 items for just level 1. So we are here, or you are here, right? We're just going to talk about these 6, and we're going to dive into each of them. And this is where we're going to get far more granular. So be prepared, and hopefully we don't bore you guys. We'll do our best to tease out some of the examples and some of the more practical things that need to be done here. And Tony, if for any reason you feel like jumping in, feel free. You can totally jump in alongside me if I'm not speaking correctly, or if you want to highlight or elaborate on anything.
Sounds good.
So the purpose of the controls in this domain is to limit access to protected data. We're talking about access control. So limit the access to your protected data, systems, and locations. And by regulating who can log on or enter, whether that's locally, remotely, or physically, which devices are authorized to connect to and which locations that can be. Once they gain access to a system or a location who has privileges to access what resources and what they can do with their level of access, et cetera. So just to note here, access control makes up 27% of level 1, and then everything that happens at level 1 is a prerequisite for 2 and then 3, but it also takes up 20% of level 3 CMMC. So this is a fairly large chunk that we're going to dive into out of the gate, and there's 4 controls that are under access control, and we'll go into each one specifically here, but here's a high-level overview. So again, if you want to take a screenshot of what lives under access control, this is a good spot to do that. As we dive into each, I'm going to try to do my best to talk about what is practical here. So I will read the screen for starters because it's interesting to read specifically what is being called out. So access control 1.001 states limit information system access to authorized users, processes, acting on behalf of authorized users or devices, and specifically in parentheses, including other information systems. Every word is very important. Every word means something when you start to comb these things and dive into the details. So, what needs to be done here? Really, what we're talking about on the technical side of things is implementing Active Directory, implementing a hiring and termination documentation or process for adding and removing users. So it's not just an informal thing that 1 or 2 people have outlined in their mind. This is very specific. And I'll call out that this is something that SWCTech does when we onboard new clients. We help capture and document those specific procedures and processes for various departments of the company. So if someone is hired in HR, they may have access to very different things than someone that's on the shop floor or on the front desk or in sales or in marketing and so forth. So what you do from there is after that is implemented, as an example, you can list those authorized users and then maintain that identity in those roles. So this is something that needs to be a living, breathing document, so to speak. These things need to be updated. So if a process changes, that needs to be updated. So just Active Directory by itself, that is insufficient. You need to maintain that spreadsheet of active users and their permissions. So there ought to be a policy in place to authorize access before it is given. And then lastly, and this is important, there ought to be implementation of NAC controls or network access controls. So if a new computer or workstation is joined to the domain, how are you being made aware of that? If someone just joins that, you need to know who that person is, what their roles are, what their authorization is, etc. And Tony, I see you're off mute, so I don't know if you had anything to add here.
No, I mean that's really getting at the core of it. It's the combination of implementing security groups, implementing controls over what devices can be on your network and what resources they can access, and making sure that there's policies that are clearly established on how those are added, and making sure that you're aware as things are added.
Good to go. And we'll keep moving. So if we cover things fast, it's because there's a lot to cover. I think there's about 40 slides. So for the second one that's mentioned here, and we're referencing very specific things too, by the way. I just want to call out, we are referencing, FAR clauses and NIST SP 800-170. We're referencing very specific and acute things that apply to these things. But, limit information system access to the types of transactions and functions that authorized users are permitted to execute. That's what it states. So what needs to be done here? Again, getting more practical. Ensure that an active control list, or ACLs, not to be confused with, I think, the ACL muscle, right, are used to limit access to applications and data based on roles. Confirm access for authorization users is restricted to only what they need access to. So if I'm in sales and marketing, for example, I don't need access to accounting. So that's, again, maybe accounting does need access to marketing and so forth. So segmenting those user roles and restricting them and having policies in place that are enforced is important here. So you want to establish policies that are focused on the principle of least privilege. Tony, I don't know if you have any other way to describe what that principle is for those that might not be familiar. Principle of least privilege.
Yeah, the idea is at the heart of it, as new employees or any employee, you take a look at the systems that they have access to. The idea is that they have access to only what they need to do their job function. What happens oftentimes is as things are being implemented and set up, it's just easier to give everybody access to everything. But obviously there's a lot of security concerns with that type of model. So the principle of least privilege is essentially making sure that it's clear as new employees are onboarded, what systems, what files they need access to, and ensuring that those are the only things that they can get to.
Thank you. It's good to break up my one voice delivery, so I appreciate you chiming in here and there. So we're on the third one of 4 for this control, which is verify and control or limit connections to and use of external information systems. An example that I would say is if you and your coworkers are working on a big proposal and everyone's like motivated to get it done and everyone's like trying to show up and do their part and go above and beyond, so they're going to want to work on that over the weekend as an example. You know, part of that proposal, if you're doing work again in the DoD or supply chain of the government, if some of that includes federal contract information or FCI, that should not be shared publicly. So you'd have to remind coworkers that in lieu of this policy, the requirement is to use the company laptops, not personal laptops or tablets. And when working on a proposal over the weekend, if that's what's happening here in this, you know, arbitrary example, you'd also want to state that, you know, everyone should be working from the cloud environment, that it's improved for processing and storing FCI information rather than other collaborative tools that they may have used for other projects. So that's a decent example here. So this does apply to external systems accessing company systems devices like, I think, BYOD. So I have a picture of a cell phone here and things like that. So let's say that's a pretty decent example for that one. And then lastly, for this particular domain, the last control that we'll call out here, last one for this domain, is control information posted or processed on publicly accessible information systems. Again, what needs to be done here from a practical standpoint is establish a company policy on handling that FCI and CUI and CTI information, and establish a company policy on the use of external information systems. So there ought to be some sort of policy you can look up for what is or is not allowed there. As we referenced the example previously, someone may need to know what those rules and regulations are. Also, it should be stated somewhere. Identification and authentication is the next one that we're going to focus on. And this really does focus on granting access to authenticate or verify the identities of those users and processes or devices. This is a prerequisite to allowing access to organizational information systems. So authenticated entities, as well as verifying the identity of those entities. It's a bit of a tongue twister. So there's 2 controls within this domain, and we're going to touch on each of them and provide some examples and practical things that need to be done here. So identify information system users, processes acting on behalf of users or devices. The example that I'll highlight that I came up with here is you want to make sure that all employees working on a project can access important information about it. Because this work is for the DoD in an example, and it may contain FCI information, you also need to prevent employees who are not working on that project from being able to access the information. So if you assign each employee, if each employee is assigned a unique user ID, then they'll log in to be able to log into that system. That would be a way to address that. Going back to what needs to be done here, you'd identify and remove generic shared accounts. You're going to want to establish a policy on the naming of a device and user accounts, and the processes and services accounts that are authorized user initiates identified. Our examples would be like scripts or automatic updates or configuration updates and scans, that's all documented as well. I don't know, Tony, if you have additional thoughts on this one here.
Yeah, one of the underlying themes is obviously being able to have that accountability and auditability in terms of what systems are doing what on your network. So again, making sure that systems are easily identifiable with like what the PC name is, for instance. And then in terms of the user side of things, identifying things like generic accounts. Oftentimes, different areas of the organization have employees that don't need like mailbox and certain other functions, but they do need some computer access. Generic accounts are often used there. At the end of the day, if that account were to be compromised or if someone were to do something malicious, it'd be very difficult to try to trace that back to a specific person and hold them accountable. So identifying those that are currently deployed and getting a plan in place to only have named user accounts.
Cool. Thank you so much. So 1.077, authenticate or verify the identities of those users, processes, or devices as a prerequisite to allowing access to organizational information systems. Let's just say you're in charge of purchasing, as an example, and you know that some laptops come with a default username and password. So in that particular instance, you'd want to notify the IT department or whoever's responsible for that all default passwords should be reset prior to that laptop use. It's just one use case or example. But again, going back to what Anthony said here, assign unique identifiers to all users to ensure authorized users initiate identified processes and service accounts, and then assign devices that access the system a unique identifier. So again, being able to trace back to, well, if Eric Clark is on this computer, how do we know that? If it's one computer on the shop floor and 6 people have access to that with one generic thing, we're not going to know if it was Bill, Bob, or Tom that did A, B, C, or X, Y, Z. So again, having that unique identifier is what we're talking about here. So hopefully that sums that up pretty well.
Yeah, we did have a question back to the AC and access control 1.003. Someone had asked, is there an access control list management tool that we would recommend for smaller organizations that can't afford some of the larger solutions that are out there? Red Seal, SolarWinds Network, Firewall, Security Management as examples. Some of that is going to be a little bit more specific to the type of firewall that you're using. What I would say is if it's a smaller organization, you likely only have one firewall. So some best practices around that is obviously making sure that you have current configurations of your firewall, ensuring that anytime that they're updated or changed, that you keep a log of that. That's one of the best practices that Swift maintains, is as soon as a change is made, we make a copy of that. So if there is something in the future that is added or changed that doesn't line up with our last copy, we can compare the two. But obviously, when you want to take it to the next level and have some more automated control over it, usually there's going to be a cost involved. So
it's a very thorough answer. I'm glad you're here with us today. So thank you, and great question. If you have any more, please, don't feel shy at all. We're happy to answer questions. Media protection. We're going to move on to that, talking about why this is important or what it is. Really, we're talking about limiting access to media storage, including within file share organizations. They might restrict the use of portable storage devices, for example, by using physical cages on workstations, or to prohibit access to certain external ports, or disabling or removing the ability to insert, read, or write to such devices. But this focuses on the data collection procedures and tools, as well as the data storage procedures for media. And that can include electronic logs, data files, databases, as well as physical media also. Think like USB drives and maybe CDs. I might be aging myself here a little bit, but we'll get into more of the specifics here. There's just the one control here, and the way that it's stated is sanitize or destroy information system media containing federal contract information before the disposal or release of, or for reuse. So again, media refers to any way to store applicable information, paper, CDs, USB drives, hard drives, mobile phones. And when you're wiping a drive, as an example, if that's something that's being discarded, it needs to be with DoD approved 5-pass or destroy. And there should be a policy established and enforced to do that. So if you manage a DoD project that requires special equipment used only by project team members, you work with the facility manager to put locks on the doors to the areas where the equipment is stored and or used. And that project team member are the only, or those members are the only individuals issued with keys for that particular space. So that will restrict the access to only those employees who work on the DoD project and require access to that particular equipment. I know there are third-party companies that you can leverage or hire for disposal of those things that meet those standards. I don't know if there's anything less official. I do believe you're going to need to have some validation and proof of if you're going to destroy those things, and some of those companies will give you that certification. So you can't just like take it to your friend's bonfire and say we burned it, right? It's not going to suffice. Now, physical protection, there are a few more domains, or sorry, controls here. Physical protection activities ensure that physical access to CUI asset containers is strictly controlled, managed, and monitored in accordance with CUI protection requirements. That means protecting your facilities, staff, and systems from physical threats like unauthorized access, theft, or damage. And I have some examples here that we'll cover, but here's if you want to grab that screenshot, this is what lives under this particular domain. These are the 4 different controls that we're going to dive into one at a time. So for 1.131, limit physical access to organizational information systems, equipment, and the respective operating environments to authorized individuals. So here, if we're establishing a secure enclave, designate areas that will fall under these things. So network equipment, think servers, any PCs with access to covered information, printers that may print covered information, and any physical parts or equipment or products, etc., that is considered CUI. So if there's a printer that is printing this information, make sure that any passerby can't just grab that and see it. That needs to be in a secure location, as an example. And there's more here that we're going to cover. I think, actually, Anthony, I don't recall, but I know if you're walking around a shop floor or a business, and if there is CUI or government or DoD information that you're working with, it ought not to be easy for someone to just walk up and unplug a port or plug into a port or tamper with that device. That would need to be in either a locked room and the authorized person would have access to it, or you can put some sort of enclosure around that's locked. And again, the folks that have those keys are the ones that are authorized under the CMMC certification.
Yeah, if I could add on to that, Eric. So this domain is very much starts to get away from some of the technical requirements, and it focuses kind of on some more of the business processes, how the business is actually processing some of the data, and what's physically accessible. So if you think of the entry to your building, are the doors locked? Does somebody have to check in with somebody before they're allowed in? We're going to get into some of the additional controls here, but the example I'll give from this first control, is there a printer in the common area that people can just walk up to before they really ever tell somebody who they are, or sign in or things like that. So it really starts to get to the physical layout of your organization, and just making sure that there's some basic protections in place, things like physical locked doors, protecting environments where CUI could potentially be stored or be visible.
Cool. The next one on the list here, escort visitors and monitor visitor activity. So there ought to be a policy for visitors to be accompanied by staff, a policy for visitors to wear badges or name tags, things of that nature, and a process for reviewing visitor audit logs. So if someone, again, like Anthony just mentioned, it could be technology enabled. I've been to different businesses where you walk in and you sign your name, and maybe you're given a badge and you are escorted to wherever conference room you're trying to go. You're not just going to wander around the building by yourself aimlessly trying to figure out where to go. You might end up somewhere where you shouldn't be. But then I've also been into different businesses where you walk in and it's all not human monitored at all. There's cameras in place, there's a man trap, there's technology for me to sign in, enter my name, information, etc. The door unlocks, I go to where I'm supposed to go, etc. So there's different levels of that. Some of it could be more analog with paper, but then someone has to be able to process and review those visitor logs and audit them. Or you can leverage some technology and some modern ways to make that a more user-friendly experience and easier to monitor and review and audit those logs, etc. So really, that's up to the business, right, to determine at what level and scale you want to do that at. And so again, speaking to maintaining audit logs and physical access, there's a control just for that. This one's interesting, though. If you think about an example, this could be pretty near and dear and close to anybody. I think if you and your coworkers like to have family or friends join you for lunch on various days, maybe it's Taco Tuesday or Feast Friday or whatever you call it, where you're at. If your company has just signed a contract with the DoD, as an example, you now need to document who enters and leaves your facility. So you'd have to work in that case with reception staff to ensure that all those employees sign in at the reception area and sign out when they leave. So you'd have to retain those paper sign-in sheets. Again, we could talk about leveraging more modern technology, etc. But you have to have something in place. If it's paper, it's got to be locked in a filing cabinet up to 1 year. And then employees would receive badges or key cards that enable tracking and logging access to those company facilities. So again, if there's a guest there, then they would need to have a lanyard or a badge or something to denote that they are a guest and that we've logged them in, for whatever reasons. Not to say that you can't have those lunches anymore. You're just going to put some more process behind it if you're doing that DoD work, right? And keep in mind, this is all level 1 stuff too. So as you kind of move up the ladder to level 3, some of these things are going to get a little bit tighter. Oop, jumped ahead too quick there. So the last one of these is 1.134. And it talks about control and manage physical access devices. So in this case, you're maintaining an inventory of those physical access devices. Could be keys, badges, key cards, and there's a process for authorizing and removing access. So if you hire a new employee, who's doling out the access to the locked door, who's creating that badge and providing that access, etc. So that's a good way to think about that as an example. So moving through here, system and information integrity. This controls to proactively monitor for suspicious activity in your environment. So breaker wall is an example here. We don't want those waves to keep crashing over into our harbors of our business, right? And there's 4 different controls that live under this domain. So this one's a bit meatier. We're going to talk about each of them individually here as we've kind of been going through this whole presentation. So identify, report, and correct information and information system flaws in a timely manner. So here we're talking about defining a strategy and mechanisms for updating vulnerabilities and flaws. And when we talk about how SWCTech can help here and or what a business ought to be doing, this is something, again, that SWCTech provides as part of our stability agreement that we offer. In fact, our full stability agreement, and also known as the FSA, for Windows servers and workstations. And we provide a policy on patching procedures and things of that nature. So as a client of ours, this one's, I wouldn't say you can just check the box, but there's a lot of things that are met under just how we go to market with supporting a lot of businesses in the area. So while we provide this service to a lot of our agreement clients, you would want a written policy that is established for company purposes. You would want to still be able to document specifically what is happening here. For the next one, provide protection from malicious code at appropriate locations within organizational information systems. What does that mean? What do you need to do here? Again, SWCTech, if you're a client of ours, we do provide antivirus on Windows workstations and Windows servers. Our clients are provided Exchange Online protection, and that's updated and maintained. We provide, in some cases, folks that work with us, FortiGate firewalls that comes with something called UTM features, and that's unified threat management. And then you'd have to have some policies for designating where antivirus and malicious code prevention shall be deployed. At what level are you deploying that, and how does that work? And I don't know, Tony, if you have additional things that you want to call out here as well, but I do have an example too. So
yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. At the heart of it is making sure that you have more than one system, hopefully, in place to help prevent malicious code from running on your systems. Antivirus is kind of the most basic example of it, but I think you touched on a few other ways that businesses can help keep malicious code from running in their environment and spreading to servers and things of that nature. So
good to go. Yeah, this one feels more basic to me from my perspective. Working in an IT company, a managed service provider, like that's a lot of what we do. So as we kind of move through this here, we talk about update malicious code protection mechanisms when new releases are available. So again, that's just stating that that software, that antivirus, anti-malware software is defined, and there's an update schedule, and it's documented that we know when that is taking place. So if you've installed anti-malware software to protect a computer from malicious code, as an example, knowing that software obviously evolves rapidly because it's a bit of an arms race, as we're aware, you configure the software to automatically check for that malware definition updates every day and updates as needed. So, I mean, similar to like if you have an iPhone or Android, apps get antiquated and out of date. You need to update them. Sometimes you need to update the software that it lives on, etc. So making sure these things are up to date so it's catching the latest threats is important here. And here, perform periodic scans of the information systems and real-time scans of files from external sources as files are downloaded, opened, or executed. I'm reading off the screen a lot with some of the stuff, but again, it is very technical. So the example that I'll give here is if you work with your company's email provider to enable enhanced protections that will scan all attachments to identify and quarantine those that might be harmful prior to a user opening them. There's some other things that SwigTech deploys. We talked about. I mentioned Exchange Online Protection. There's a feature called Advanced Threat Protection, although I think Microsoft may have just changed the name on that, so I could be antiquated myself here a bit. But there's things that are called safe links, so it may disable the ability to even get to that malicious site, as an example. So some of these softwares can also scan those files that are downloaded or copied from removable media, such as USB drives. It quarantines any suspicious files and notifies some sort of security team. So really, it's that performing those scans and quarantining things and having anti-malware set up and spam filtering set up where something is happening with this, where you're kind of prohibiting the ability for someone to actually infect the system.
Yeah, and if I could add on to that, usually, depending on how the malicious code might be trying to come into your system, it may get scanned a few times. If it's coming in through email, your anti-spam or your anti-malware engine on your email system may have a look at it. Then when the user actually goes to execute it, now the desktop antivirus may be taking a look at it, and there may be some additional protections after that with some foothold protections, other software, even a step further after the AV if the AV didn't stop it. So depending on how that user was interacting with that code, it's likely getting scanned, hopefully getting scanned by more than one system.
Good add there, thank you. So systems and communications protection. This is a level 1 practice that sets up basic network safeguards to segregate external, or i.e. publicly accessible information from internal systems and data. 2 controls are here, so this one's not as deep as the ones where there's 4. Those ones feel like fairly daunting, but hopefully by kind of breaking these down individually, it's helping this feel a little bit more approachable. I mean, that's kind of the goal here, is to really allow everyone to understand what has to happen at each step to make it feel like something that can be accomplished. So as we dive into this one, 175, it states monitor, control, and protect organizational communications, i.e. information transmitted or received by organizational information systems at the external boundaries and key internal boundaries of the information systems. It's a bit of a mouthful. Some of these things can be difficult to interpret, so that's why we're here, is to help through some of this stuff. But this control requires you to set up firewalls, web proxies, gateways, and other protections so you can monitor, control, and protect the flow of that data passing between internal and external environments. So traffic sent over the internet or over commercial telecommunication lines pose specific risks that need to be managed as part of this particular control. And then finally here, this is the last control of the last domain. This practice requires you to segregate publicly accessible systems from your internal systems where that CUI information resides. So by putting them on separate subnetworks, this applies both to your on-premise networks and your cloud-based networks specifically. And many small businesses will want to partner with web hosting companies that offer integrated security as a DIY approach. Can take a significant expertise and resources to kind of do that. So again, we're here to help. If you have questions about this stuff, we can certainly, again, help understand what is going on at each of these levels. And Tony, I'll have you chime in on this one if you'd like.
Yeah. Yeah, the big thing with this control is you start to think about any publicly accessible resources that you have that you're housing internally at your organization. Things like if your phone system is externally accessible, if you have your company's website is being hosted on a server inside of your office, or a camera system, a security camera system, and there's some kind of outside access established for logging in and taking a look at that. Just making sure that anything that could be hit from the public internet is segmented off and there's subnets in place to keep that traffic from getting to your internal business network. Cool.
This has been, there's just a ton of detail for all of these. So we hope that we were able to cover quite a bit of it. in a way that is like more approachable, like I had mentioned. And we do have, this is a series of events, so we do have another one that is right around the corner here coming up in July. So with this one, we're actually going to partner up with a different speaker, so you guys won't have to hear me talk the whole time necessarily. We're partnering up with Kaseya for their powered services, and it'll be on Wednesday, July 15th, 2021. There'll be a link in the follow-up email from today's event if you'd like to register for that. But this one's going to be a bit more, I don't want to say detailed, that's probably not the right way, but the takeaways, you'll be able to identify CMMC levels 1 through all the way up to 5, understand the terminology, which again is important because there's a lot of it. We'll be able to discuss more in detail the particular timeline for implementation. We'll further refine and define the interim rule and what that means, and then understanding the enforcement for non-compliance, like what happens if you're not compliant, if you're trying to do this work. And then there'll be a quick demonstration of something that's called Compliance Manager for CMMC, which is something that's really critical for as you navigate this and actually knock out these steps. There's a way to track that. So when it comes time to do those audits, we can control how that's like kind of doled out, so to speak. So the speaker there will be Max Kruger with Kaseya, and then I'll be introducing him as our speaker for that. And then finally, we are going to be going back to in-person events. We're probably still going to do remote ones and virtual ones as well, but we are going to be hosting an event at Maggiano's, and everyone that shows up will be able to take some food home to their families. It's very good food. If you've ever done one of these events with us in the past before the pandemic, it'll be a great kind of reunion, so to speak. If you're new to it, it's a great central location. But when we talk about adopting Teams Phone, also known as Teams Voice, through the last year and a half with everything that's happened, a lot of businesses have kind of made that leap, and the demand for getting onto a new phone kind of paradigm like Teams has grown significantly, and we've done a lot of work to help businesses kind of make that leap. So we're going to kind of dissect it, and we're going to be bringing hardware there as well to showcase what some of those things look like a headset. Anthony's wearing one. I don't want to grab mine because it'll turn on, but we'll show a lot of the different devices and how that kind of works as well. So I want to thank everybody for attending today. We appreciate your time taken out of your busy day to join us. As a follow-up, we will be sending a Net Promoter Score to ask how we did, as well as a recap of this event, an on-demand presentation if you want to watch it again or later, what have you, share it with anybody else in your organization, you can do that. And then we'll provide some links to the upcoming events as well.